So that only leaves two things in the world. That is stuff made by nature, and then stuff that's made by humans, which is design. Yeah, for me, design is not sort of a styling exercise where you make something more streamlined or younger or hipper or more up to date. It's about what's the most ultimate thing that you can make with the techniques or the things you have today. Yeah, it's more about inventing stuff or inventing new ways or something, sometimes even using old ways to make something new. But it's always, okay, what is the most ultimate way to deal with that? And then that extra layer of the poetry or where people can find their own story, I don't want to talk about, but it's in there. And I know, but I'll stop when I see it's in there, but we don't talk about it. Being Dutch and being taught design sort of halfway through the 90s, of course, Droog was a big thing happening at the time. And what I more and more notice is that there's a lot of people, a lot of designers that think that before they start designing, they have to have a good concept. And I think you should have a good feeling about something, why you want to do a project. And this feeling is a concept, but a concept is not like a A4 piece of paper written out of what and why and who and some research. So you start a project, and then afterwards, when you're finished, you can talk about it, or you can reflect on it, or halfway you reflect on it, but you never should just start by words only. And also, as soon as you can explain something to the full 100%, you don't have to make it because you can explain it. And for me, the reason for making products is that you want to share something with somebody that you cannot put in a book or in a picture, but you have to put it in a chair or a light. So words could never, they say a picture says more than 1,000 words, but a chair can also say more than 5 pictures, or it depends on what medium you want to talk in as a creative person. There is something extra. But the moment when you think that you make a chair and it's more than just that chair, there is something extra, there is. But that's exactly the thing that I don't want to put too much words to, because it will take away the magic. It would be. I'd rather have you come up with a story, or anyone who uses it. I know it's a bit like you can tell a story, but then I'd rather talk about poetry, where at least you can interpret those few words that are given into your own story or your own, and you make it fit into your own life. And actually, I'm not a big fan of that type of design, which is about storytelling, which is only one meaning for one product, and you just have to get the artist or the designer's opinion into you have to like it or not. And I think it's very often better if you just do just a little step backwards and just give ingredients for as many stories as you can come up with. Depending on who I have in front of me, I tell a different story. If there's somebody I know who's very technical, then I tell a very technical story about rising heat and how we did the propeller and how the bearings go into the light and what the quality is of that, and then of the light quality. And then if it's someone who's more interested in history, then I talk about what chandeliers were like. And so there should be many stories. It never should be one story. I think every idea, every concept, although I hate that word because it sort of, to me, it refers to a type of design that I don't like. But every idea behind a product has sort of an edition, and sometimes it's endless. Sometimes some things you want to see everywhere, or you don't mind seeing everywhere. And other things you don't want to. You hope that there are not more than 5 in the world. And I tend to have ideas that sometimes you want to see a lot and sometimes you don't want to see more than 5 in the world. So I hope to find the right channel for it, to see where that idea can end up. And sometimes an idea also starts with, like last year, or maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I did a chair, which was for a project. It's called the Seamless Chair, and it was the project was sort of a question to designers, like what do you think upholstery will be like in the future? And just as an experiment, I had a chair completely covered in felt, but the felt was made on the chair, so there's no seams, because felt is just made by rubbing, so you don't have to do any weaving and knotting, or it's just rubbing wool on the chair everywhere, and then you have a seamlessly upholstered chair. That chair ended up in a museum, and it took 40 hours to felt, so it's never going to be industrial. But with the same idea, and if I hadn't made the seamless chair, I wouldn't have thought of the jumper, which is a chair I did last year for Established & Sons, where I found out about a knitting machine that can seamlessly knit covers. And then the problem with using knitting for upholstery is that there's too much stretch in it, and it will wear too much, and it will, once there's a hole in the knit, it will sort of lather. I decided to wash it at a high temperature, so you have a very felt-like cover which you can pull over a chair. And that chair is a bit more affordable, and maybe in the future there will be something even more affordable. But every time I also know that with that scale, or with that, it needs to have a different appearance. It needs to appeal to more people. Right? Imagine a house where every product in the room tries to tell you a story, or tries to adapt to your story. It's horrible. I mean, the thing is that you can look at once you buy a house and you try to find good stuff for your own home, you realize that you don't want all these stories and all these design things and all these ideas. Sometimes you just want something very plain, and you just want the light to tell the story, or you just want the table to tell a story, or trigger a story. And that comes with how often you use it, but also how often it is being made, and how large the edition of the idea is. Well, to make a simple piece of cloth on a weaving machine, you need half of the wires to go down, half of the wires to be able to go up. And you put the thread in through it, and then you make it go the other way, put another thread through, and then you have a very simple weave. This machine can control all the warp wires on the weaving machine by computer. So it can go up here, up there, up there, up there, up there. So it can make very complex patterns. And it's not it's a machine that's been used for already for quite a while. Even Maharam has one, but very often it is used to make something that you step back from, because you want to look at a picture or larger. Because normally you have to, in the old days, even with a jacquard machine, you had a pattern that was maybe this big and it was repeated. So you would make something this big, and if you're a good designer, you can make something that looks this big, because you can sort of shift the pattern. And I thought it would be very nice to make something on a machine that made you realize that every wire on the machine was lifted up independently. So we developed a font, a typeface, on a computer program that is half binding, half pixel letter, and we can actually type in Photoshop or copy paste in Photoshop, because this is Michael Jackson's Wikipedia. We just copy paste it from the internet, and we can weave it onto textile, or we weave textile with it, which are just letters, and then the Photoshop image is going straight to the machine, and it can read it, and they just have to make a few adjustments, and it can weave. So this is very textile, but this is also trying to get a very small element, and with textile it's a binding, which has a lot of consequences for what the rest of the piece of textile looks like. What I like about textiles is that if you take a yarn, you take a yarn and you weave or knit something with it, then already the yarn will say something about the knit or the weave you made with it. And then if you sew something out of it, the piece of textile that you made will already say something will have a lot to do with the shape that you make out of it. You know, if you take a very rigid piece of fabric or a very flexible piece of fabric, even if you put two circles together, it's going to be a different shape. And for me, this is has a lot to do with how I design. I try to get small elements and multiply them in a way, because all the small elements say so much about the final shape, and they so more often it's about the technique, or inventing a technique, or inventing some materials that you work with, and from there it's as long as you treat them truthfully, you will get something nice, or something that at least fits. And I mean, and in a way that's also how nature works, because you just have a DNA, and within the DNA everything is fixed, is whatever comes out of it, even a cancer, although it's something horrible, it looks beautiful. You know, even if an illness will look beautiful, because it's from within the small elements grow into something bigger. So the first idea, actually how we came to the shape, is I thought, okay, if you wanted 64 lights, or in this case 63 lights, because the first light was 64, you take a bundle of 64 energy cables, tape them, and you split them up into 4 bundles of 16, tape them up, and then you open them in 4 bundles of 4. So in total you can have a chandelier of 64 lights. And this is the design that I delivered to Mooi. So the way of making dictates everything within light, and you follow a natural structure. The nice thing about this project is that what I thought was a good and handy way to make something, it wasn't. And halfway through, Massa Wonders came and said, well, I don't think it's still too much soldering going on in all the open ends of 64 LEDs. And says, but I have an idea that I'm working on for a light with floss that we could use very well for your light. And because this light only needs to be wired here and there. And the secret is that it's a metal structure and it's painted twice. So it's painted with a plastic paint, and then it's painted with this is, I think it's a brass or copper paint, which will guide the currency. So they designed a special snap-on LED that you can snap on every end, as long as it's stripped, and the LED lights up. And the nice thing about it is that Marcel Wanders' light didn't happen because there was still a lot of bugs in it. But one of the problems they had which was made this shape perfect, was that of course the paint has a little bit more resistance than a normal copper wire. So the distance from the electricity point to the LED point should always be the same distance. Within that structure, this is how that worked. So for me, this is also a bit thinking textiles in a way, that you start with something small, you start with an element, and you see how you can multiply it into a shape. This is something I did this year for Richard Lampert. It's a bean bag for kids, and it's knitted by Innova, and Innova helped me knit the jumper chair, but they also knitted the cover for the Lazy Bastard, the textile. And they have a knitting machine that can, it's like a double-bedded circular knitting machine with filling. And they're very good at knitting pieces of textile with pillows integrated. So this textile looks like it's been embroidered or like sewn through, but it's actually just two layers of knitting knitted at the same time, and occasionally they intersect. So you get these lines. This is where the machine has the needles of the two sides of the needles making a stitch at the same place. And then in between there's a wire that really fluffs up if there's no tension on it. So it looks like there's some Dacron in it, but it's just one wire being let through. So you can make pillows, and then normally they make mattress covers. But also that machine has a sort of a computer jacquard system in it. So they can control every needle with an endless repetition. So that doesn't need to be a repetition. So we did 3 pieces of textile, which is this tire, and it's sewn together here, and then we made the profile of the tire. And we made the inside of the tire as well. So that was this year for Richard Lampert, and then for next year he wants to do garden furniture. You can see my, this is what I make normally. So, as I said, that's also one of the reasons why Dick van Hoff is doing all his own stuff, and I just have to work for factories because I'm not very handy, I'm very sloppy. So this was my sketch of a chair with a suspended back and something a place where you can put a pillow. And then Vladi, my assistant, made a few of these models, and we also made this. To test comfort, and so this is just to see if you can sit on a surface like that, and we use the key clamps. Just you have to think away, look past it, just to know that what should we put up for kind of frame, where do we need metal to make a comfortable place to sit. But when we were making this one, there was a lot of sewing involved, so we decided to skip to go to a standard netting, and then we made that one. And this is already sitting quite comfortable. And now we're thinking of how the pipes are gonna run and what kind of structure we're gonna have. And this is what Vladi made today. So I don't know if this once you see it, if it will ever be there, you might not even recognize it. So it can change a lot still. There's a large group of designers, like a Jurgen Bij or a close friend Vicky Somers, that are more into designing dreams, or sort of designing, like thinking what would be the ultimate place to live in, or what would be the ultimate product to live in. And I think I'm more a designer that says what is possible, what is within our possibilities, the not maybe not the most ultimate, but how close can we get? And I think that's where the difference is, and that's not. It might sound like a sort of a value or something bad, because but I am not that romantic, and I'm not that much of a dreamer, and but I love listening to Jurgen's dreams. Can I be pragmatic for you? Can I solve your problems? Can I see? So for me, it's coming from sort of a wish and a possibility, and somewhere they should meet. And I have very little wishes, but I know a lot about possibilities. And I think with Jurgen, he has a lot of wishes and a lot of dreams, and he has just a little bit less possibilities. But that's I think that's a mind that you're born with, or that you're raised with, and it stops at maybe 18, or that you're not really developing that anymore. And that's how you are in this world. And it's good always to find, to connect. That was made with leftover materials from my graduation project. So it's the first thing I actually made after graduating, when I rented my first small studio in Eindhoven. And for my graduation project, I had knitted tubes out of glass fiber that I stuffed with balloons and put resin on it. And then I took a big garbage bag that I put over it, and I deflated the garbage bag with a small pump. So the garbage bag would push the textile over the balloons and cluster it. And I thought it would be ideal because your glass fibers with resin, super strong, and you can make any shape. And I take balloons, so just to show that you can make a lot of weird shapes, but you could also suck it around a mold or blow it into a mold. But the problem is that once you knit a glass fiber, you do this with a glass fiber, and it's not strong, because to use glass fiber to its fullest extent, you have to make straight lines. So this is the first thing that I did, was making straight lines around a big inflatable balloon that I still had left over from my graduation, because I also used it as a mold. Most of the time that I'm here, or the best days that I have, are not the days that I finish a project, but that I start a project. So I like starting projects a little bit better than finishing projects. And so if you look at what is on the shelves, there are still so many projects that have never even made it into a serious project, or that sort of made it into the website, but I hardly sold anyone any of it, or that's the way I work. I do not wait for a question from a manufacturer. Sometimes while I'm waiting for questions from manufacturers, I generate questions or solutions or problems myself. And so I have something up my sleeve when I meet a factory or a company or a director or a art director of a label. And that's also how projects very often start, is that you meet somebody and you say, well, is that a problem you have? Well, actually, it does come close to a project that I'm working on now, or something that I've been wondering about, or been experimenting with. And so it happens that then the week after, you can already go there with some sketches or some models and say, well, what would this look like in your factory or from your factory? So it's not very often that something is. It's never finished. It can go on. And sometimes I get a briefing, but the best thing is just to have a good conversation with, like, what would you like and what can you do, and then if you don't get a clear answer, ask it again, and then. But to be able to have a conversation is a luxury. To be able to, I mean, it's the random light got into Moy because it was presented in I was making it myself first, and it was in a carpet brochure, and that ended up on the desk of Marcel Wanders, who said to his assistant, "We should have a light like this." And then the assistant used to be in my school, and she said, "I think I know the guy who made that light. We can have that light." So he called, and that's been sort of a luck, or that's also a luxury. And the only thing you can do when you just graduate is just make whatever you feel like making, or when you have a birthday party, give someone a present that you made yourself, or just make, and you will be discovered, or you will be picked up, or you will. The worst thing you can do is do nothing and hope for people to call you or ask you for something.